So now I'll move over to show you the interface within CATIA. So the SEER-Ply cost estimator is fully integrated with CATIA v5. It works with composite designs that have composite parameters and materials defined. These are the typical list of materials would be stored under the composite parameters branch. There can be one or many. And also it works with the Ply stacking data within the composites model. After installation, the SEER-Ply cost estimator command appears in a new toolbar, and you click this command to start the estimation process. So I'll click that, and that will bring up, first it will open up SEER and gather the knowledge base information, as well as all the Ply data and geometrical data from within CATIA. And now, once the Ply cost estimator interface is open, the first and probably most important input would be your manufacturing environment. You would select the appropriate environment for this particular design. An environment could be part or location specific. For each of these inputs, there's little help you can use to. You can choose the kind of short help to look and read about each of the inputs, or there's a whole. You can use the F1 function to get a detailed help file, and it explains more with more information about the Ply cost estimator. So typically you would select the manufacturing environment, and that will load all the other process inputs for this estimate. You can refine or change those as you wish, but generally you might be simply clicking the environment, entering your production quantity, and then estimate. But I'll show you the process options that are currently defined for this environment. So we're using Apply Cut equipment, ultrasonic cutting, laser location equipment. We're using a reusable nylon bag, estimated debulk interval of 5, and we're going to use the autoclave infusion method with non-destructive testing included, tool fabrication and design, trim and finishing. There's a drilling details option where if there are holes defined in the design, hole features, we will pick those up and map those appropriately to SEER drilling operations. Alternatively, you could simply, even though they're not yet part of the design, you may want to model the drilling of holes that you know will be used in that design. So you could add that as a manual step as well. At this point, I'll click the estimate option. So that will use all the design information and input information and build up the initial estimate in SEER. It usually takes a few seconds, not more than that. So the estimate results from SEER are brought back into CATIA, so the designer or user can see a summary report of what that estimate looks like. From here, you can simply click OK, and the estimate information that you just used will be stored with the CATIA file. You could cancel and do nothing. You can have a look at SEER in detail. You can modify the estimate, which means go back to the input panel, change some of the inputs and rerun the estimate. Or you can save the estimate as an MFG file. I'll go in and say OK, and we'll look at the estimate within CATIA. So the information in CATIA from the Ply cost estimator is stored in a special parameter branch. All the inputs that we use are there and listed. So these are now part of the design file for review by other users that may or may not have SEER installed, along with the results, so we know what the estimate hours for this panel is, as well as the labor cost and so on. As the design changes, you use different materials, the material properties are updated, or there are certain elements in your ply stacking that may or may not be included or required for estimation purposes, you could turn those off as an example, and you could rerun the estimate without those plies included to only have an estimate that includes information of interest. So I'll rerun that estimate as an example. So now we've excluded some plies that were there as for some purpose, but not required in the final product. And so we're rerunning that estimate. It now shows without those particular plies, the cost is reduced by 4%. And the cost trend arrow shows which way the design is going relative to the previously run estimate. So let's go and have a look at the SEER estimate itself, and we'll see the detail that's included. So we included in that environment choice the hand layup operation, non-destructive testing, autoclave, curing, trimming, and finishing. There are detailed inputs for each of these elements and processes, including the labor rates, the environment, production experience, product classification, which is the standard that we're working to, labor calibration, learning curves, and many other inputs. The ply table data that came from SEER is now organized, the ply table data from CATIA has been organized into and grouped by sizes, orientation, and coverage percent. So we don't need to have a single entry for every ply of CATIA. We'll analyze the whole stack and group all the like-size plies before putting them into SEER. So everything's formatted accordingly to make the estimation more efficient. Oops. All the debulking parameters, the bag that we use, the intervals, manufacturing description, shape complexity, all modeled from CATIA. The tooling, we have a list of tooling that you can define a whole list for each element type. These would be set up as part of your environment, and you can include these in your estimate or not. We chose to include them. We can look at the autoclave inputs. So these ones, we've estimated the number of thermocouples and vacuum ports. Trimming, we're using 5-axis machining. The trim length from the CATIA design, and the finishing. So there's a lot more goes into the estimate compared to what you see on the ply cost estimator input. So from such a small amount of data requirement from ply cost estimator, you get a really detailed estimate in SEER. And here are, and it's not just the output itself is very detailed too. You've got estimates for the tool preparation, the roll creel prep and change times, the cutting, the labeling, kitting, ply placement, for the hand layout, the debulking effort, and many other areas that or cost outputs and time outputs, and some not cost outputs, other factors and information that's useful for design and analysis are also included. So I'll go back to CATIA and actually show you how we would create our own environment for, let's say, this wing panel. So what we do there, we go to our list of current environments. We would start off with an environment that closely resembles what we want to model and create a copy of that. I'll rename that. So I'll call it a large wing panel. And we go into the wing panel. We open up the knowledge base file for the environment. So here, for each element in SEER, you can go down one by one and select the labor rates, the efficiencies, the experience, the classification, the learning curves, and define those precisely for each environment. You could change the tooling and other process-specific information. In our case, I'm going to use the change parameters in multiple work elements and just apply these same settings across the whole set of the whole environment. So I'll say $100 for direct, 125 for setup. We make these wing panels all the time, so very high. Labor calibration, we usually about 20%. We have a factor of 1.2 for labor. So I'll apply that across the project, across all the elements. Click finish. And so now all my environment settings have the new labor rates and efficiencies. So I'll save this project. And now I can modify the rules associated to that environment and all the defaults. So I could change what the currency is to that environment, what are the key processes I want to be as the default within the apply cost estimator, and I'll say the apply cut equipment is water jet, and so on. So these will become all my initial defaults for that new environment. So I can go down, there are rules, process rules you can apply for when labeling or kitting are applied, when to apply debulking and not, what process rates to apply for given machinery and equipment in that environment. You can map your drilling features to the whole features of CATIA and much more. So then what we'll do, so we'll save that environment. So what this does, it saves the SEER-Ply file as knowledge bases, usually takes a few seconds, and then saves the rules file associated to that environment. And then it's ready to use within CATIA. So it's a relatively quick process to create those environments. But of course, to match your own environment, you would need to be able to get the information for that environment, like labor rates and efficiencies and so on. So it might take you a bit longer. So we'll say, okay, everything's saved. I'll save that as well. And we'll go back to CATIA. And now we'll restart the estimate. And we now have our wing panel large environment. So I'll just select that and estimate. So that should come back within a few seconds. I should get the new estimate for this part within its environment. So I now have new currency, euros. I've got reduced hours and reduced cost in this case. So now I'm more confident in my estimate. So at this point, it could be that the environments are set up by a SEER user. They don't have to be, but it could be. And then they could request the engineer to use a given environment for a certain design, and then the engineer in CATIA can run that environment and then save this as an MFG file. So this will save that design as an MFG file. And what that MFG file is now available to other SEER users to pull into a larger estimate. For example, here's an estimate of a fighter aircraft wing where we have a full-up estimate including assembly, harness installations, so a lot more than just the wing skin. But now we have a real live estimate from CATIA that we want to use. So that process begins what we call a merge sub-project. So we'll pick up the wing panel we just found created from CATIA, and we'll open that. When we merge projects into a parent project, the merged project will inherit the parent project properties. In this case, the parent project's an imperial unit of measure and dollars. So the file being from CATIA was in metric and euros. So that will be converted seamlessly into this project. So we'll pull that in. So basically you can have one person working in metric, the other imperial. SEER will manage all of that kind of data transition. So now we have the wing panel from CATIA into our project. We can organize where it sits in the structure. So now we can turn off the previous estimate, and now we can add a comment, say data estimate from SEER-Ply cost estimator, something like that. So now we have that estimate within the overall project structure.